أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. So I wanted to make a video today about the Theomorphic Order, and this term, the Theomorphic Order, but specifically its sociological aspects, the sociological aspects of this Theomorphic Order. Now usually when people think of Sharia and Islam and Khilafah, all these, they get scared, especially if they're not Muslim, and even Muslims nowadays are too scared to talk about it, and in fact they prefer not to talk about it so they can hide their disbelief in these things, right? But what Theomorphic Order means, this is a term you can get from William Shiddick, who is an amazing translator of Ibn Arabi and Wahadatul Wujud, which I believe to be the highest marafa of Tawheed itself, is Wahadatul Wujud, or one of the highest, most latif articulations. But this idea of Theomorphic Order is basically that just like Adam was created in the Surat Ilahi, in the exact same way, the nazam that we are supposed to establish through juhud and through mujahida on earth, and through fighting for justice and speaking the truth in the face of all tyrants, even the highest tyrant, we have to speak the truth in his face, no matter what the consequences, because Islam is non-pragmatic. That is the religion, and that is the means by which we seek martyrdom, right? And so speaking the truth in this way establishes an order that is also in the image of God. Just think about it. If each individual is created in the image of God, if there's a proper hierarchy of the people who are created in the image of God, won't that overall hierarchy also be in the image of God as a collective? So in that way, it has Surat Ilahi in the Nazam. So all the Asma Husna in the right Nisbat and Tanazum, and they're explained and expressed and displayed in the Theomorphic Order, right? And so what jihad is, even though people are scared of this term, it is not qital. Qital is the military struggle, which only takes place after the establishment of Medina, which is a spontaneous occurrence that occurs as a reward from God after the caller to the faith, the caller to Theomorphic Order, through theomorphic individuality, through articulating the belief system and narrative about creation. That person is calling with his voice and his behavior and his actions toward that order and toward belief in that order, but not toward its implementation on a political level. But spontaneously, what's supposed to happen is, as a gift from God, once proof is established against the people who that invitation is given to, and that they in their hearts know to be true, and it's established as false. Once it's established as false, once it's established that they're falsifying a truth that they know in their hearts, then what's supposed to happen spontaneously from God, there's supposed to be the descent of help or nusra or aid in the form of a pre-existing state, calling the group of people who had been initially calling, the first initial inviters to the faith, calling toward this message. It invites those people to come migrate to this pre-existing state, which through spontaneous conversion is now a Muslim state. It invites the initial inviters to the message to now come lead that state, to take over the machinery of that state. So there's a migration that takes place. So nothing in that process is violent, but once that state is established through the spontaneous calling of God, which you should, as a pragmatic person, as a secular pragmatic person, you shouldn't really believe that to be possible, that a whole state will spontaneously convert in response to the calling of some strangers from some other nation, and then they're going to migrate there, and you shouldn't even believe that to be possible. Pragmatically speaking, it doesn't make any sense that that's possible. So let the Muslims do this crazy process of just calling people to the message, and then, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But pragmatically speaking, as someone who can think pragmatically, I don't think that it's possible pragmatically. But with the aid of God, with the Nusra of Allah, with metaphysical descent of divine help and the angelic descent of the angelic host upon the believers, the descent of the Holy Spirit, the Ruh Qudus, upon the believing, upon the faithful, that's the only way possible for this order to be established, for Theomorphic Order to be established, right? This is the only possible way. or that's the methodology that as a Muslim, as a person of faith, as one of the faithfuls, the person, you know, struggling for caliphate or khilafah, or I don't use that term, I'm just using it because it's more popular. It's the imama, or the priesthood of Abraham, is what's going to be established. The kingdom of God is what's going to be established, starting with Khurasan. And you can look up Khurasan, the classical region. It's basically all of Central Asia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Eastern Iran, going up to southern Russia, and all the area where the Uyghur of the Chinese Muslims are. That whole area is what's known in the Islamic world, because there's different terminology and different civilizations for parts of the world. So you got it, it's called Central Asia. We call it Khorasan, but it's more than Central Asia. It's this huge kind of like transcontinental north-south region. Like it's almost as big as Russia from east to west, you know, but it's north to south. Anyways, so yeah, so we're trying to struggle to establish the Theomorphic Order. That's our purpose in life as the faithful, as believers. And the vast majority of Muslims aren't believers. They're not even really Muslims anymore. You know, the people, we say that, you know, there's a lot of ihtiyat that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, and he never openly called someone a munafiq. That's true, but those munafiqs didn't openly do kufr. You know, they didn't openly do kufr. But what we have today is even the board members of different masjids, like in New Orleans, I don't want to name names right now, but the board members of both Abu Bakr Masjid, or whatever Jefferson Muslim Association, and then the Masjid Umar on the West Bank, they have munafiqs, clear munafiqs on the board, like clear munafiqs. And this is just in New Orleans, right? But all of America, it tends to be like this. And what it is like they're clearly doing kufr. They clearly won't accept the authority of the Quran in their open affairs, and they're clearly not accepting, they're not acting as Muslims, but they're sitting on the board of the exam. They won't do anything that the hadith says. They won't do anything what the Quran says. They will not accept the Quran. They will not accept al-Furqan. They will not accept the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the criterion of judgment. They won't accept the hukum of Allah and His Rasul as a criterion of the message. You know, they just won't do it. And so if they won't do that, they're clearly not only munafiqs, they're kafirs. The thing that makes them munafiq, they're kafir. You know, of course, munafiq is the worst kind of kafir. So they're clearly kafir by doing what I just described. But what makes them munafiq is that despite openly doing that and clearly being kuffar, they still want to claim, make the dawah that they're Muslim. They're not Muslim. These people are not Muslim. And so what we have is, especially outside in the United States, meaning countries where we're living in the Western country, and the culture of those Western countries, especially in America, has completely and totally permeated our consciousness. And we think like Americans, we're pragmatists, we're American realists more than we're faith, the mu'mineen. Our ideology is more like Americans, American realism, and not even the American, not like, American revolutionary, which was not as realistic. It was more idealistic. You know, going against Britain at the time was totally stupid, pragmatically speaking. It was foolish, pragmatically speaking, but they still did it because they believed in principle and integrity. So it's closer to Iman than the American realism today. But the Muslims here in America, they take on the American pragmatism, the American realism completely and totally. They completely take it on, right? They're totally and completely taking on American consciousness, and then they have these kind of surface level, superficial, wearing the thobe, having a little bit of a dari, but it's super lined up, and it has nothing to do with the sunnah. It's more Muslim culture, and their dad's on the board, and he happens to be a doctor, and so he's very influential, and he's respected American society. They get to go to the Super Bowl games, and they do all this bullshit, but their life is not about enacting Islam as the Theomorphic Order. They're not struggling for it. Despite the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed them with so much, they will not struggle for the Theomorphic Order. And if someone does not have faith that the Theomorphic Order with the Nusra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be established through our struggle, but our struggle is required, and then the Nusra of Allah will come. But if we don't make that struggle, then the Nusra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't come, because our iman isn't sincere. It's only going to get done in a single generation. Imam al-Mahdi will come and Islam will be established in a single generation. We have to believe that it's possible in a single generation. What's happened is the Muslims have, because they're trusting more, especially Sunni Muslims, because they're trusting more in the pragmatic aspects, in the pragmatic aspects of being, pragmatic aspects of the struggle to become Muslims, and there's no pragmatic way to implement this fully without the Nusra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They think it's not possible and we shouldn't struggle. They're right, it's not possible without the Nusra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Pragmatically, we are at a disadvantage, but we still have to enact that struggle. Then the help of Allah will come, the Nusra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come, and we will succeed through our faith in the Nusra, just like it happened at Badr. Just like Badr was Yawmul Furqan, there will be a second Yawmul Furqan. Just as like there was a Medina and a Hijrah to Medina and a spontaneous emergence of Medina, there will be a second spontaneous emergence of Medina. But first we have to make the struggle of making the dawah correctly, and believe that it's possible in a single generation to implement Islam once we reform ourselves, once we purify ourselves, right? But after that, after we purify ourselves, then the next step is, once the spontaneous Medina occurs and we make hijrah there, then we have to struggle in a single generation to implement Islam. But we have to do both these steps intelligently and correctly, and the Nusra of Allah will come when we're doing the second step, when we're struggling politically, economically, socially, and militarily to implement the Theomorphic Order and to overcome the resistance of let's say secular, pragmatic, satanic, sociopathic order. When Taghut, when then the tide of Allah will come in that struggle. When we're doing it correctly, when we're having faith, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's Nusra will come, and there will be a second Yawmul Furqan, which is Badr. There will be a second Badr, and then they will be defeated. And then there will also be maybe a Sulh Hudaybiyah. That might happen too. That's the third step. But the Nusra of Allah will come when we're struggling fully with perfect iman and faith, that we will see Imam al-Mahdi, and then Imam al-Mahdi will lead us into the fatah of the deen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.